everybody. So it's another week and another book talk, and I am AnnaLee Dragon, the director of the Kinderhook Memorial Library. And this week I thought we would talk about one of my favorite types of books, which is debuts. So the very first thing that an author gets published. There's a reason behind why I love those so much, and my thinking anyway, whether this is accurate or not is up for discussion. But my thinking is that the author frequently spends years and years of their life with this idea living in their head and working on it and selling it and maybe editing it with feedback from publishers and editors and publicists. And so they come to this thing that is like they've had all of this time and energy and sweat and emotion poured into it. And so it's so good. And then they become a star a lot of times. Their books get picked up. And I think then sometimes they get in a rush, like they get advances and they're expected to churn things out. And so I don't always, it's not that I don't love other books that come after, but I usually am fond of the first one the most, because I think it's just like their baby in a way that the others aren't. And this isn't always true, but the examples I'm going to show you today of these authors, these are some of the best books I've read and some of my favorites, and they are all debut novels. They're all fiction this week. So the first one I wanted to talk about is a very popular author, and I don't have the actual physical book here now that I'm looking at my pile. It's John Grisham, and it's A Time to Kill, which has since been made into a major motion picture with Matthew McConaughey. But that book, to me, is quintessential Grisham. It is the story of a murder trial and the attack of a young girl, and it happens in the South, and there is racial tensions, and there are economic disparities, and it's about the attorney who kind of takes on this unwinnable case trying to help. And there is just something about it that it's so well done. And I think it's a little more emotional. I think John Grisham later on becomes a lot more thriller, and this one has that element in it, like a page turner, but there's just some real emotion in it, a very raw emotion that I responded to immediately. So I don't know, there's just something about it that while it's a hard read in some ways because it's very touchy subject matter, it's one of my favorite of his books, and I think it just shows the kind of writer he is, which is he's fantastic. And I've loved all of his books and I read all of his books, but A Time to Kill holds a special place in my heart. So especially if you've seen the movie but you haven't read the book's better. I mean, which is almost always true. So you should check out A Time to Kill by John Grisham. And again, I'm gonna put covers of all the books at the end of this, so you can just wait till the ending and you'll see all the books, titles and authors, so you can look them up if they're ones that you haven't read yet. So the next one I wanted to talk about is one who is a much less known author because I think has only written one book so far, but God, it's so good. So it's called The City of Lost Fortunes by Bryan Camp. I'll just hold it up so you can see the title and author here. This book it looks like the beginning of a series he's trying to plan, so there may be more to come, and we'll see if there is good. But this book takes place in New Orleans, and it has some of my favorite elements, which is some fantasy, some magical realism. There's gods of different religions playing a poker game. There's the city of New Orleans, which is a character in and of itself, in my opinion. It's just got all of the elements of something. And the crazy part is I read about him. He is a young author. This is his debut. And he wrote the manuscript for this book mostly when he was being evacuated during Katrina. Sitting in the backseat of a car was when this book came to him, because he has clearly such a love for the place that he's from. And New Orleans is such a fascinating city with kind of a dark, mysterious history. And this book captures all of that. And it is some of my favorite writing in recent years that I've read by a new author. I was sad it was over, and picking it up now makes me want to read it again, even though I have a stack of to be read, just because I loved it so very much. So even if you're not into, because I know some of the stuff I read is not everybody's cup of tea, with the magic and the kind of supernatural elements and things like that, but this book I really think transcends all of that. And so even if you're not fully into that, you might really love this one. So I would suggest trying it. The City of Lost Fortunes by Bryan Camp. Loved. Another one that was a first book that came out a few years ago that won a bunch of prizes. And the thing that got me to pick this one up was it has a blurb by Margaret Atwood, who does not write blurbs for people. She doesn't shill books. So that made me pick this up. As you know, she wrote The Handmaid's Tale. So this book is called The Power by Naomi Alderman. And this book, it was just so different from anything I had read in a really long time, which is a hard thing to do. What story hasn't been written, by all of the wonderful authors we have, and such a diverse group of people in the world with different experiences. So like, what story hasn't been written? And this has some supernatural elements, but just like a Margaret Atwood, has sort of a dystopian future. And it starts out one way and there's a great twist in it. But I don't want to give away anything about it. It's initially a feminist kind of message, but there is some greater warning, I would argue, that absolute power corrupts absolutely. And this book, even though you're cheering for them at one point, then there's another point where you start to second guess that choice. So I thought it was really well written. I thought it was really original, which, like I said, I think is very hard to do. In the year 2020, everything has been either happening or written down. So to come up with something new is fascinating to me, and highly recommend The Power by Naomi Alderman. So these other two are both a little magical realism, a little fantasy-like, so I apologize if that's not your thing. I'll be happy to recommend other debut novels too, but this one, it'd be interesting to read in the summer because I read it in the winter. It's called The Bear and the Nightingale by Katherine Arden. This is kind of, in a way, like a Russian folk story, and it is one of the most atmospheric reads I've had in years. This is part of a trilogy that is out, but the first book, I don't know, it transported me. And if it's the kind of book you want to read cuddled up on the couch, with cocoa, and not that it's all touchy-feely warm, there's all stories about Russian folklore and mythology involved in it. And it just absolutely transporting. She captures scene and place so well that I just got wrapped up in it and couldn't put it down. So it would be interesting to read it when it's so warm outside. I don't know if it would have the same effect, but I know that at the time I wanted to turn all the lights off and read it in front of the fire. It's just a really great book. And I've read the other ones and I like them, but I still like this one the best. So check that one out, or maybe put it on your hold shelf and wait a little till it gets a little cooler out in the fall, and then you'll have a nice atmospheric read for you. And the last book I wanted to talk about actually there's two more. So there's one I don't have here called The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova that is, it's not historical fiction. It poses this premise, an alternate history sort of, that what if Dracula was a real person and that he was Vlad the Impaler. That is where the Dracula myth came from, was kind of a personification of Vlad the Impaler's sort of bloodthirstiness, is where the idea came from for a vampire. But obviously he was a real person. And so this book supposes that he actually was a vampire. And it is, again, pretty atmospheric, all over Eastern Europe. It made me want to go to Budapest really badly. It's very, if you're a book person, it's very library archive oriented. This girl is finding her father's notes about this mystery, and she's chasing him from one archive to another all over Eastern Europe. And it's a big book. So it's a commitment, which I happen to like. If I love a book, I like to live in it. So I'm happy to have a 1,000-page book if it's good. And this one, to me, she came out with another novel that I didn't love as much, but this one I was head over heels for. It has some of the stuff I like, and then it was just this, again, sense of place, which I guess a lot of these have in common, is this really strong sense of place that speaks to me. So The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova, especially if you're looking for something that's a little heavier duty, that'll keep you busy for a while. And then the last one I wanted to talk about is by Helen Wecker, and it's called The Golem and the Jinni. And so I didn't know anything about what a golem actually was. It's a Jewish myth about a clay person, basically, that's created and serves somebody during their lifetime. And I think most of us have heard stories of genies in bottles or lamps. This takes place in the early 1900s in New York City, which was another strong sense of place that I loved because I like thinking about Victorian New York City. It's so different from what it is now. And it's about these two characters, a real golem and a real genie, I mean real in that they are the characters in the book. And they interact with each other, and how they sort of end up, both of them transported to New York City, and then what happens afterwards. So there's a lot of magic and a lot of, you know, suspension of disbelief in this one, which for me was perfect. It's kind of escapist, and I'm all for that. I love escapist books. So I've recommended this one to some people who also really enjoyed it. I don't know, again, if it's your thing or not, but it's kind of eerie and magical, and just, I thought, a lovely read. And so I haven't read, I don't know if she's written any other books at this point. This one came out 6 or 7 years ago, so it's not a brand new book. All of these are available in the library system. Many of them are probably in Overdrive or Hoopla also. So those are my first picks for debut novels. I have more, so if those aren't up your alley and you want to send us an email or give us a phone call, I'd be happy to make some recommendations of some other new books that maybe are first-time debut that I really enjoyed, that I think you would too. I kind of collect them now. So I hope that you've been enjoying the talks. I keep hearing from you, and I love that. So please keep that coming. Let me know how I'm doing, and if there's something you want me to talk about. And otherwise, I will be back next week. I did this weekend, yesterday, a little pop-up outside browsing session with some new stuff. And I hope to do that again in the future. It went over really well, but it gave people a chance to browse books al fresco. And it was a pleasant day outside, and it was really fun. So hopefully we'll do that again sometime soon. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And yeah, I miss you all very much, and I'm glad that you're enjoying the talks, and I can't wait to come up with some other topics for you. So let me know if you think of any. I'll talk to you next week. Bye.